Hey gang, in this video, we're going to continue our series on fact checking and take a look at one of the tools that I like to use called the Ad Fontes Media Chart. Before we get into the chart, I want to tell you a little bit about the company that started it. Ad Fontes Media is a Colorado-based watchdog organization primarily known for its media bias chart, which rates media sources in terms of political bias and reliability. The organization was founded in 2018 by patent attorney Vanessa Otero with the goal of combating political polarization and media bias. Otero was inspired to start Ad Fontes Media after she became frustrated with the lack of consensus on which news sources were credible. She noticed that people on different sides of the political spectrum often had very different views on the same news stories. This led her to wonder whether there was a way to objectively assess the bias and reliability of news sources. Otero developed a methodology for rating news sources based on their content and their track record of accuracy. She then recruited a team of analysts from across the political spectrum to rate news sources using that methodology. The result was the Ad Fontes Media Chart, which launched in 2019. The Ad Fontes Media Bias Chart rates sources on a scale of -42 to 42, with -42 being the most left-leaning and 42 being the most right-leaning. The chart also rates news sources on a scale of 0 to 64, with 64 being the most reliable. The Ad Fontes Media Bias Chart has become a popular resource for people who are trying to navigate the complex and often confusing news landscape. The chart has been praised for its objectivity and its ability to help people identify news sources that are aligned with their political views or not aligned with their political views. In addition to the media bias chart, Ad Fontes Media also produces a variety of other resources, including educational materials. Ad Fontes Media offers a variety of educational materials on media literacy and how to identify bias in news coverage. Research reports. Ad Fontes Media publishes research reports on a variety of topics related to media bias and disinformation. Consulting services. Ad Fontes Media offers consulting services to businesses and organizations that want to help their employees and customers become more informed consumers of news. Ad Fontes Media is a valuable resource for anyone who wants to be more informed about the news and the media landscape. The organization's work is essential to combating political polarization and helping people make better decisions about the information they consume. Now, let's take a look at the actual chart and see if we recognize anyone. What we're looking at is the actual chart from the homepage of Ad Fontes Media. Once focused in on the chart, you'll see an arch that goes from the lower left, and down here we see Tony Michaels, up to a high point in the center, and then further down as we get closer and farther to the right. Down here, in a low reliability level and way far right, is Danny Boy. What I found by examining the chart is that the farther left a news source goes, such as Tony Michaels or the Young Turks, the less reliable they become. Same thing with coming over on the right. The farther right you go, such as Ben Shapiro and Dan Bongino, the less reliable you become. Once you're more in the center, such as NPR, you're more reliable and have an equal bias. It's important to know that the political bias does not necessarily mean you are mainstream or middle of the road. It just shows that your bias is equal to both sides. As I said in the introduction, the scale goes from -42 on the far left to +42 on the far right. The Tony Michaels podcast scores a reliability of 13.73 out of a possibility of 64. His bias is -30.67. Alex Jones, on the other hand, is even more extreme. His bias is 31.67, and his reliability is only 6.67. What you'll also notice is that in the different levels, your score gives you a particular type of label. Face it, that's life. From 0 to 16, you're considered less reliable. Remember, Tony Michaels was 13.73. Dan Bongino is 15.83. Less reliable. Alex Jones was 6.67. I mean, that borderline's, I don't know, Dan. Lying? From 0 to 8, you are rated as contains inaccurate and fabricated info. From 8 to 16, you're misleading info. I've been saying it. Once you score 16 to 40, you start obtaining a news value and level of reliability. Between 16 and 24, you have a selective or incomplete story, unfair persuasion, and are still propaganda. You hearing that, Dan? Once you get above 24, between 24 and 32, your opinion or wide variation in reliability. So the commentary isn't necessarily yet analysis. Between 32 and 40, you've stepped into analysis, but still have a wide variation in reliability. This is where you find folks like Fox News, MSNBC, and Rachel Maddow. Between 40 and 48, you're more reliable. This is a mix of fact and analysis or simple fact reporting. You'll find most of the networks in this range. CNN, Fox Business, to name two. Also, many of the major networks like ABC, NBC, and CBS fall in this area as well. You also find the Wall Street Journal and magazines like The New Yorker. Above 48, you're in a rare crowd. The only one that seems to rate that on this chart is NPR. National Public Radio is also smack down the middle with a slight left leaning of negative 0.28, not even a full point liberal. That's about as equal biased as you're going to see. They also score 49.33, making them thorough fact reporting or fact-dense analysis. Above 56 is original fact reporting and high effort. There's no one on this chart at this time that scores that high. Let's go to my home area of Pennsylvania and search some of my childhood newspapers. The Reading Eagle. The Reading Eagle has a reliability score of 42.65 and a bias of negative 0.31. Again, pretty much about down the middle as you're going to get. Let's compare that to the Pottstown Mercury. Boom. A left-leaning bias of negative 0.38 and reliability of 41.09. Next up in Allentown is the Morning Call. The Morning Call is just above the Mercury at a reliability of 44.29 and a left-leaning bias of negative 0.24. One of the more popular programs with NPR is Fresh Air. You see there a bias of negative 6.73 and a reliability about the same at 43.67. These small dots are individual stories from which you'll see the link if you want to check out the actual story. Check out our show notes at yergs.com. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.